Congressman Bobby Scott, who is with us, 3rd District. Congressman Bobby Scott, he's also a senior Democrat now. Hate to say that because you don't want to tip off his age, but he's now, you could call him a veteran, senior Democrat. He's also chairman of the Education and Labor Committee and sits on many other influential committees in the House of Representatives. Congressman Scott, great to have you with us, sir.
John, it's good to be back. How you doing?
I know it's been too long, right? We always try to get you on, but I know you're busy being chairman of a committee, a lot of work, so you're always kind of out there doing stuff. Okay, so impeachment, the articles to be released, Jerry, Adam Schiff released his report to Jerry Nadler. I saw your statement on it on Friday. Looks like you're going to be voting for impeachment. This is a partisan process. You have no Republicans.
I haven't seen the articles, so we'll have to wait until the articles actually come out before we can actually determine. But I think the cases have been made. You indicated that there are no Republicans. I think Democrats at this point just have to make the case as to, first of all, you have to look at why impeachment is in the Constitution, and then whether or not the actions of the president require his removal from office. If you look at the report from the Intelligence Committee, there seems to be no real question about the facts. He invited Ukraine to interfere with the upcoming presidential election. He dangled a presidential visit, and he withheld crucial military aid to coerce Ukraine into interfering in the election. And I think one of the things I've been surprised at is that although there's apparently there's no question of the facts, the question is whether it was right or wrong. I would think most Americans would conclude that it was wrong. Now, whether it needs to be removed from office would be the next question. You could debate that, but whether or not it's wrong, I've been surprised that the Republican argument is that it wasn't wrong. You also have to put it in context. Going back to the Mueller report with the obstruction of justice, and continuing up until today, witness intimidation. If you talk to prosecutors about what they would do if somebody in court proceedings was threatening witnesses, obstructing justice, what would they prosecute? And most of them say they've put people in jail for a lot less than the president has done. And there's no indication that it's going to stop. He was intimidating witnesses, one lady, while she was testifying. And so he won't stop. The Emoluments Clause, taking money from foreign governments, started the night of the inauguration, where Kuwait moved their reception from the Four Seasons to the Trump Hotel, making money off of the as president. And it won't stop. He tried to get the G7 to stay at the Trump hotels. That would be illegal. I think the fact that it was in the middle of the impeachment inquiry meant that nobody wanted to defend him on that. So he changed his mind. But it's obvious that he just won't stop. And then you get the Ukrainian situation, where you have the situation. You have somebody who believes that above the law, and it's obvious that he won't stop. He's inviting China to interfere in the next election. So that's the question.
Wait a minute. China's already interfered in the 2018 election during the midterms, which gave you the committee chairmanship by targeting swing districts over the trade deal, right? I mean, they've already done that. I mean, that's what they did in 2018, basically by not trading with certain areas and sections of the country to influence the outcome. But the bottom line is Ukraine got the money. They didn't get any money from the Obama administration. They got MREs and blankets. They got the money. So if you don't like his policy,
they got the money that had been appropriated, and they only got it because the president was caught. And after he got caught, he released the money. The question that people ought to be thinking about is what would have happened if the whistleblower hadn't blown the whistle, if he hadn't been caught, and he actually succeeded in the scheme of sabotaging Joe Biden's campaign, possibly bumping him off as a candidate, and being able to run against a presumably weaker candidate. If suppose he'd gotten away with it, what are we talking about our democracy?
Well, there was nothing he got away with, and
that's because he got caught.
This is a partisan process. You have no Republican votes in the House. In fact, you're probably going to lose 6, 8, 10, or 12 Democrats are going to vote the other way, Congressman. And look, you just had your chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, go on TV and say Republicans in the Senate, if they don't vote for impeachment, they have to look in the mirror. They're not patriotic. What do you say to the Democratic Congresspeople who are going to vote no when it comes to the floor? There's 2 of them now.
I'll say to all of the members of Congress, you have to make your individual decision. The Speaker has been very clear that they're not going to encourage people to vote yes or no. They're going to present the evidence, and people will vote the way they feel is right. But you have a situation where the Constitution was written in such a way that if you don't like somebody, you wait till the next election and vote them out. There's some situations where you can't wait. And that's the assessment that we have to make. They call it a political process. I think it's not political. Suggests that Democrats and Republicans are supposed to look at it different ways. It's actually a judgment call.
Right.
Even though he has committed offenses that would technically qualify as impeachable, the next question is you have to use your judgment. Why can't you wait till the next election? And that's the question that people are going to have to ask, and people can end up on either side of that. The point I was making was that on the emoluments clause, he keeps trying, and on the obstruction of justice, he keeps doing it, and on interfering in the next election, he has indicated no remorse for what he's done, has no indication that it was wrong to invite Ukraine to interfere in the next election, and has shown every indication that he's going to keep doing it. He's on the White House lawn inviting China to intervene in the next election. And the reason you can't, one of the reasons you can't wait till the next election is if he keeps trying to interfere with the election. You're not going to have a fair election. And so that's the argument in favor, and then we have to make sure that the evidence supports that, and that the articles are written in such a way to show that you can't wait until the next election. Then people will just have to vote. I'm satisfied that it would be unlikely that you'd get any Republican vote if he had Fifth Avenue and shot somebody.
No, that was a metaphor. Come on, I mean, you can't bring that up into a serious argument. He was just making a metaphor at that time. But look, go out and beat him in 2020, and your caucus.
I think that's the question. Can you wait till the next election when the allegation is that he is interfering with the next election?
You're already spinning your loss now, right? So that's going to be what you're going to say on November 9th of November 8th of 2020 is that he cheated again when you know he's going to win again. Look, Congressman, look at these economic numbers that just came out. You know, another 265,000 jobs, unemployment at an all-time low.
He has
black unemployment at an all-time low.
He inherited a good economy. If you look at the monthly jobs report, you can look from the last 20 years. You can look at the month that the Obama economic initiative went into effect. We're losing hundreds of thousands of jobs a month. His initiative went in, we went up, and we've been flat at about 220 to 250,000 jobs a month ever since. You cannot, when Trump's economic plan went into effect, it cost twice as much, and you can see not a wrinkle. You can't, if you don't have the dates under the chart, you couldn't point to the date that it went into effect. There hadn't been a wrinkle since then. In fact, the jobs per month are actually lower in the last 3 years than they were in the last three years of the Obama administration. The Obama administration created more. The unemployment rate was spiraling out of control. The Obama initiative went into effect, and the unemployment rate has been drifting lower ever since. And you can when the unemployment rate is way high, you could point to that. That's when the initiative went into effect, and it's been drifting lower ever since. And you can't, if you don't show the dates under the graph, you don't see a wrinkle.
Well, here's some dates
in the unemployment rate.
Here's some dates I can share with you.
Under Trump.
Here's some dates I can share with you. Black unemployment is at the lowest point it's ever been
and it was
in
going
50
down,
years.
And it
That's
was going
the date.
down. It was going
Teenage
down.
black unemployment, lowest it's ever been
you're right.
in 5 decades. That's
You're right.
the date. I have dates. It's the lowest it's ever been.
You're right. And if
you.
you look at the trend that began when the Obama initiative went into effect, it is a continuous trend. Unemployment has been dropping ever since, and you can't show a wrinkle when the Trump administration spent twice as much on its economic policy. As a matter of fact, the rate of decline slowed down a little bit, but still kept going down. And so he inherited a good economy.
So that's what you're going to go to the voters.
The fact that you got a good economy shouldn't justify the idea that you want to doesn't justify inviting foreign governments into interfering in the election.
I'm not saying let's separate the two out. I'm just saying that you guys know that Trump is going to get reelected in 2020. You can't do anything about it. So what you have to do now is this impeachment ruse. Because what do you got? What is your caucus going to go to the voters with? We have the best economy ever, and it's because of what Obama did in 2008 or 9. I mean, you can't go to the voters with that. You guys are going to get killed.
John, are you saying that there was nothing wrong with inviting Ukraine into interfering in an American election?
He ran on a platform of not giving away foreign dollars to other countries, especially those that have been involved in corruption. He did the same thing in South America. He told Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, you're not getting a dime until you stop the caravans. That was a quid pro quo. It happens every day.
Does that mean no? There's nothing wrong with inviting Ukraine.
He never invited Ukraine. He said on the call with Ambassador Salman, he said over and over, "There's no quid pro quo. I'm not tying anything."
Wait a minute. Suppose there was no quid pro quo, just inviting them without any quid pro quo. The president invented this quid pro quo standard. If you invite Russia, if you invite Ukraine into interfering in the election,
he'd invite
that's
them.
The problem.
He said,
that's the problem.
He said a sitting vice president of the United States, whether he was running for president or not, a sitting vice president who was the point person on Ukraine, allowed his son to take a job at $3.5 million sitting on a board of a corrupt company of which he knew nothing about, had no experience, had never been there, couldn't even find it on a map. I mean, and the president said, "Hey, why don't you look into that? Why don't you look into that?" This was the vice president of the United States.
Maybe we should look at children of elected officials like Trump's children. But there is apparently you're not questioning whether or not the money was withheld.
Because I don't think it was withheld for that reason. I think it was withheld for the same reason that he's tried to withhold all of it, because he doesn't like giving it out, and he campaigned on that. You guys are just mad because
let's just agree to disagree. I think it was wrong to withhold the money for the purpose of enticing a foreign government to interfere in the campaign. But all that frankly has been happening down the hall. I've been working on higher education all this time, trying to improve the situation where people going to college can't go to college without incurring crushing debt. We have legislation that's been reported from committee. We'll probably pass it in the House in January. That will significantly make college significantly more affordable. It will allow Pell Grants to be used for short-term programs where you can actually get a job. You can't use them for short-term programs now. Significantly improve the student loan program, where loans will be cheaper to take out and easier to pay off. There are a lot of good things in that bill, and that's what we've been working on. We've been working on prescriptive drug bills, drug prices, and this week we're going to be considering legislation that will reduce drug prices over the next 10 years by as much as $500 billion. By main strategy is to reduce prices to something comparable to what the drug companies are charging in other countries. We found drugs, same drug in America,
Right.
charged 2, 3, 5 times, 10 times, 30 times more in the United States than they're charging and making a profit on in other states. We're going to say you can't. We're going to be negotiating, aiming at about 120% of what you're charging in the local markets, and that's important because the question has been, well, if we cut them too much, they'll leave. No, if they're at 120%,
Oh yeah, we're
the
getting
United
ripped
States,
off. Yeah,
the
we're getting ripped off.
the United States will be the biggest market, charging the highest price.
Right.
And if we can get them down to 120%, that's a whole lot better than 3 and 4 times the price.
I'm totally with you on that.
So we're doing that. There's a problem, a recurring problem that we're dealing with, getting to a crisis. What's called multi-employer pension funds.
Right.
A lot of huge pension funds going south, and we've calculated that if the million or so people lose their pensions, the federal budget will be worse off by between $170 billion and north of $300 billion, because we can calculate if 1 million people lose their pensions, more people will be on Medicaid, more people will be on food stamps, more people will be getting social services, and we can
Right.
calculate that and come up with numbers in the $170 billion range. And we have figured out a way to solve the problem at a cost of about $60 billion. Now, that's more than we'd like to spend, but it's a whole lot better than 170 to 300. Without even considering the pain and suffering when people work their entire career and then start losing their pensions, or the businesses that go broke trying to pay as much as the pensions as they can. So that's another thing we're working on. The child abuse prevention legislation has passed the House. Deals with the problem we had with Heaven Watkins, who regrettably died. And one of the problems was that social service placed her in a situation where if they had known what had happened in Minnesota,
Right.
they wouldn't have made that placement. We have a strategy so that states can share information to avoid situations like that. So there's a lot of stuff that we're actively involved in. I've got legislation for school construction. If we have an infrastructure bill, a lot of our schools are 30, 40, 50 years old and in desperately need of repair. This would go a long way in not only repairing those schools but creating a lot of jobs. There's a lot of stuff that we're actively doing, and we're going to address the question of impeachment. Some of us believe that inviting foreign governments into interfering in presidential elections is wrong. Others don't think there's a problem with it, and people will cast their votes as they see fit. But in the meanwhile, there are a lot of things that we're doing. House passed the Older Americans Act reauthorization. One of the things we did there was to make early onset of Alzheimer's. Those who have early onset of Alzheimer's would be eligible for programs under the Older Americans Act, like Meals on Wheels and transportation assistance and things like that.
This is all good stuff. By the way, we're with Congressman Bobby Scott, Democrat, 3rd District, Virginia. He's chairman of Education and Labor in the House of Representatives. These are all great things you're thinking about, but because of this impeachment fiasco you're doing, it's sucking all the air out of the room. You're not getting anything passed. You're not getting anything done.
We're getting things passed. It's just not getting covered. I spent 3 days on the Higher Education Act.
Exactly.
And I spent 3 days on the Higher Education Act, getting it out of committee, making significant improvements in access and affordability to college, helping people make sure they complete their course, holding colleges more accountable, putting more money in from encouraging money from the states. It took 3 days to get it out of committee. We finally got it out of committee, and there wasn't anything in the press because right down the hall they were having impeachment.
That's my
impeachment
point.
Hearings. And so we're getting a lot done. It's just not getting. And that's your job. You ought to be.
I'm trying. That's why I had you on my show today. I'm trying to get it on. But
talk about the Higher Education Act.
Your speaker and Schiff and Nadler are sucking all the air out of the room. Let's get the USMCA. Right,
Well,
Mexico.
Let me mention one other thing before we get to that, and that is the minimum wage. We passed the minimum wage bill. Right now it's $7.25. We haven't passed a increase in the minimum wage in 10 years, and inflation has eroded that to the point where you can't rent a modest two-bedroom apartment at a full-time minimum wage salary, full-time, 40 hours a week, minimum wage. You can't afford a modest two-bedroom apartment in any county in the United States. I'm not talking about Manhattan and San Francisco. $15 an hour by 2025. Gradually,
I'm for that.
By 2025, and we passed that in the House, and it's pending in the Senate. Now, okay, the USMCA, we're working on it. I think they're very close, and we're actually optimistic that we're get to a point where we can actually pass it. The negotiations are not complete. When the negotiations are complete, we'll know what we can do. But I mean, there's optimism that we can get to a point where it can get a consensus and get a real strong vote
by the end of the year.
Probably not by the end of the year. Probably early next year.
All right. Well, you know, it's been estimated that if we pass UMCA as it's been approved by Canada and Mexico, it means up to 1% increase in our GDP. So it's a big deal. A lot of jobs, a lot of money, especially in Virginia, in your district also. I want to get to one final thing, which is something that I've been working on for some time, which is surprise billing legislation, which I would think that you would be all over this, Congressman, because of the way you look at the world. And personally, I was nailed for this by like $7,000. I got a $7,000 invoice in the mail from a hospital. I don't know anything. I didn't have any idea what it was about. I didn't have $7,000.
The surprise bill turns out when you go to a hospital that's, quote, in network, and they have hired people who are not in network, are not bound by your insurance company payments, they have the opportunity to send you a bill for what I understand is whatever they want.
Exactly.
Okay, and the hospitals hire these people and let them prey on the patients.
Bingo.
It's not really the hospital's problem. We have to do something about that to get the patient out of it.
Right.
And let the hospital and the insurance company and the doctors argue about it, but get the patient out. There are a number of different strategies about that. But once you get the patient out, I'm not sure it's as important exactly how you solve it. As long as the patient is out, the patient can pay the copays and deductibles that they would expect to pay if everybody was, quote, in network. We have a lot of different proposals, and we're trying to find out what can get a consensus. We haven't gotten there quite yet, but we're working on it. And frankly, we ought to have an answer pretty soon.
All right. Well, I'm going to be looking for your leadership on that, and you got to get the patient out of the middle. I don't want to be negotiating it, but this is affecting a lot of your constituents.
That's the first order of business, and like your situation, the amount of money involved. When studies show that the average person can't come up with $400. When you start getting saddled with thousands of dollars, I mean that's
and then you get a judgment, you get garnished, and you knew nothing about it.
Somebody rich like you can just write the check.
Well,
but, there's a lot of people it would cause a great hardship.
I'm in media now. If I was in Congress for all this time, and then I could retire and go get a big lobbying job for $2 million annually, like your colleagues get when they get out, we wouldn't be having this dialogue.
Well, I'm going to try. If the voters let me, I'll try to stay in, and we'll never get one of those jobs.
You'll never have to be concerned about that. Hey, just on surprise billing, I'm opposed to rate setting. There's basically two schools of thought. Rate setting, I think you mentioned arbitration without the patient in there. I don't want the government to get involved in that.
Well, let's come up with something that somebody's got to set the rate. And if the problem now is the doctors are setting the rate, they just send you a bill.
Right, exactly.
If you have the insurance company set the rate, we have to come up with something probably in the middle, and we're working on it.
And
we want to get the patient out of it.
Exactly. And you think you're going to get to USMCA in January?
My guess is January. It might lock up and do it, but before the end of the year. But I think January. And part of the discussion is you've got all these nice words on paper. We want to make sure they're actually enforceable, and that's what we're working on.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Bobby Scott, Mike Congressman, 3rd District, Virginia, Democrat, for being with us today. He is also the chairman of the Education and Labor Committee. He's getting no press for all of his good work that he's doing in some of these areas, so we try to provide that. Congressman, thank you for being with us, sir.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
As always.